Okay. Welcome everyone to Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut. We are continuing our series on Maaseh Merkavah, the workings of the chariot. Where we left off last week is we got into a discussion of prayer and song and the vibrations of the universe, string theory, God singing the world into creation. The way we got to this is, since Maaseh Merkavah deals extensively with angels, the Chariot and the Ophanim. So we just asked a simple question: what are angels? And as part of that discussion, we brought the Talmudic statement by the sages that every day from the river of fire, God creates angels. And these angels that are coming specifically from the river of fire, they sing song and praises to God, and they cease to exist. And we connected that with modern science. They now know that at every moment, particles are coming in and out of existence. We saw the amazing synergy between Maaseh Merkavah and quantum physics. And then we discussed the idea of song, because their whole being, even if it's a billionth of a second, is wrapped up with or expressed through song. That's how we ended the discussion last week. I want to continue with the idea of prayer and various connections to Maaseh Merkavah. And one of them is we will not get to till next week, but it's a very, very important connection. I'll just tell you already, hopefully we'll get through what we need to get through tonight. And next week, we're going to do a very, very quick review of chapters 2 through 11 in the book of Ezekiel, even though traditionally, when you talk about Maaseh Merkavah, we are talking almost strictly about the first chapter. That we have gone through already. There's obviously much more to say about it. So why would we go through chapters 2 through 11? Is because in a few places, chapter 3, chapter 8, and chapter 11, Ezekiel goes back to the vision he had in chapter 1. And it's very hard to get a handle on the time framework. But nonetheless, because there are these additional, almost call them flashbacks to his vision, it's important that we add this to what we're calling Maaseh Merkavah. And one of the elements that we won't get to until chapter 11 is that we've talked extensively about how he saw the Chariot with 4 faces: a lion, an ox, an eagle, and a human being. All of a sudden, in chapter 11, the ox disappears, and the new face is called a keruv, the kruvim. And in fact, in chapter 11, the kruvim almost, in a certain way, take over central stage of his whole vision. And yet they're not mentioned until chapter 11. And so the reason I'm mentioning this is the sages ask, what happened to the ox? How did it come that this new image, the Kruvim. And we'll wait until then to go into different places in the Torah that the Kruvim are mentioned and their importance to understanding Maseh Merkavah. But the sages say that the ox, in a certain way, is an allusion, a hint to the golden calf. And so it says that Yechezkel prayed that the image of the ox would be taken away and would be placed with the Kruvim. And they say because his reasoning was, how can a prosecutor become a defender? The golden calf, of course, is one of the most horrific sins in Jewish history. So the sages say Ezekiel's reasoning is, I would like to replace the ox with a more favorable image. And in fact, that is what happens. So even though we're not going to discuss this in length until next week, it's important to understand this very, very important connection between prayer and Maseh Merkavah. As we began last week, we see that the essence of these angels are wrapped up in song. And we brought the very, very important gematria, that the same gematria for prayer, tefillah, is the gematria for song, shirah. So here we have a lot of things coming together, and now we're going to continue with a number of statements from the Tikkunei Zohar, linking prayer to Maseh Merkavah. This is in the Tikkunei Zohar. And one of the first things they say is that the chashmal, a subject that we've dealt with extensively, chashmal is this brilliant color or energy that represents all paradox, because chash means silent, mal means speaking. And the Tikkunei Zohar says, chashmal, this is prayer. What's the connection? The connection is, according to Tikkunei Zohar, is a human being, when they are in a state of prayer, sometimes they are silent and sometimes they're speaking. This goes very well with the most important prayer in Judaism. Is called the Amidah, which literally means the standing prayer, because we stand when we say it. But other references it's called the Shmona Esrei, because originally there were 18 blessings. Later, another blessing was added. So we actually have 19 blessings in the Amidah. Nonetheless, we still call it the Shmona Esrei. But also, people also refer to it as the silent prayer, because when we pray, it is seemingly silent. The rest of prayer, depending on the congregation, it could be quite loud, or have singing, or chanting, or responsive reading. But when it gets to the Amidah, it's quiet. But the paradox is, why is it connected to chashmal, is we're told very clearly in the halacha that it is not supposed to be silent, that a person should be moving their lips. And there's different opinions of how to actually fulfill this, but our ears should hear what our mouths are enunciating. But still, it's very, very quiet. And in fact, a lot of people, they do move their lips, but you barely can hear anything. So that's the connection in the Tikkunei Zohar, that prayer itself is sometimes silent and sometimes speaking. Now, even within the Amidah, even if we're enunciating the words, and even if our ears are hearing it, we're told that no one else's ears are supposed to hear, because then you're disturbing other people. Nonetheless, there are two major places, though it could be anywhere, that many times we stop the recitation of words and we allow our neshamas to go to a place without words. So again, we can understand why the Tikkunei Zohar is equating chashmal with prayer. There's a very, very beautiful connection to really the whole vision of Ezekiel, is that there is this paradox of speaking and silence that is happening. Now, another statement in the Tikkunei Zohar is something that we have discussed already, is that the four-letter name of God, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, equals 26. But we know that everywhere that it's written, we don't pronounce it that way. We pronounce it by another name of God altogether, the name Aleph and Daled and Nun and Yud. That equals 65. So when you put 26 and 65 together, it equals 91. And 91, as we've said, is the same gematria as an angel, malach. So just like the name Aleph and Dalet and Nun and Yud is like the vessel for the four-letter name of God, so too an angel is a messenger, is a vessel for the message of its creator. So that is a very important connection that we've made already. But here, the Tikkunei Zohar says that we know that the two main elements that we've discussed over and over again is the fact that Yechezkel is seeing these Chariot with four faces, and they also have four wings. So the Tikkunei Zohar says the four-letter name of God, this parallels or corresponds to the four faces that Yechezkel is seeing or experiencing. And the four-letter name of Aleph, Daled, Nun, and Yud, these are the four wings. Now, both of these names have four letters. So the four-letter name of God corresponds to the four faces. The four letters of the name that where we pronounce God's name are the wings. Now, in, let's say, poetic form, many times we relate to prayer as that prayer are the wings of our desires, our requests, our attempt to be close to God. We're sending up our requests and our longing to be close to God like wings of an angel. So here we see another very, very important connection between prayer and Ma'aseh Merkavah. And now I want to add one more very, very beautiful and profound connection here. because we're talking about the number 91 being the unification of these two names of God. And 91 being the numerical value of angel, malach. It's also the numerical value of Sukkah, a Sukkah. So what's the connection here? Actually, there are many connections, many very, very beautiful connections. Is in the Zohar, the schach, the covering of the Sukkah is called the schach. And in the Zohar, it's equated in a metaphor to the wings of the Shekhinah. It's as if when you're sitting in your sukkah and you look up at the schach, it's as if the Shekhinah, God's presence, is hovering over us, protecting us, and comforting us, and giving us shade and love and light. So here we see that the angels we're describing as having wings. And in, I believe it was last week's class already, we were talking about how the Ophanim and the Chariot become the platform on which the Merkavah is moving. And on the Merkavah is the image of God. And so here, when we sit in a sukkah, we have some of these elements of the Merkavah. Now, it's clear that one of the faces of the Merkavah was the eagle. And when we come out of Egypt, the Torah says that God took us out of Egypt on eagle's wings. So here again, we have this imagery of eagles, wings, angels, birds, Shekhinah, and the kind of like the glue that brings this all together is the numerical value. That God's name, when it's unified with the way it's written and pronounced, is 91. Angel, malach is 91. Sukkah is 91. So we're seeing that the experience of being in the Sukkah is starting to sound like a Merkavah. And we could see this even stronger, and this we will get to tonight, Bezrat Hashem, is, and we've mentioned this many times, that in Ezekiel's vision, in Zechariah's vision, in Daniel's vision, it's all in the numbers 4. 4 is the cardinal symbolism that the vision is being given over into. But in Isaiah's vision, which hopefully we will get to tonight, he sees a different name for angels, Seraphim, and they have 6 wings. So one of the secrets of Sukkah is when you sit in a Sukkah, you're sitting in a 6-sided structure, a cube. You have the floor and the ceiling and the 4 cardinal sides. This is the same way that we shake lulav. When we shake lulav, we're shaking to the 6 directions, the 4 primary directions, but above and below as well. And so in Isaiah's vision of the Merkavah, he is experiencing the angels with 6 wings. And so here, this is just a very, very beautiful thought. Believe it or not, Sukkot is not that far away. Sukkot is about 8 weeks away, 2 months away. So everyone remember this, that when you sit in your sukkah, it's as if you're sitting in a Merkavah. And that is, it's just a wonderful kavana when you're looking around your sukkah and you're feeling the peace and the protection and the angelic energies that are prevalent. And remember, we're told, Ha'avot Hema Merkavah. The Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, they are the Merkavah. And who are we inviting into our sukkah? Yushpizin, Avram, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and David. They're all the Merkavah. So these are just beautiful, beautiful connections to Ezekiel's vision, to prayer, to song. And here we connected it to Sukkah. And here it's a good time to mention that we've discussed from the beginning, and it's been a theme throughout, that Ezekiel's vision in part is being fueled by his mystical meditation. As Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan said, all prophecy comes back to the prophet's usage of meditation to become proper vessels for prophecy. But the whole idea of the Merkavah is not limited to the patriarchs, to the prophets. It's an invitation to each and every person to use prayer, song, meditation to create what we call the Merkavah. Again, a Merkavah is a vehicle. It's a vehicle to take us from one level of consciousness to another level of consciousness. And with this, we're now going to reintroduce someone that we mentioned towards the beginning of the classes, and that's Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Navi. Why are we turning to him? For two reasons. The first reason is that the one that we already discussed, but it's worth going back over again, is that when Eliyahu flees for his life to escape the king and the queen who were trying to kill all the prophets, and they were unfortunately very successful. And it's a whole story which I'm not going to tell now, but he escapes to Beersheba. And in Beersheba, he's about to give up. He just feels so alone and isolated and cut off that he even expresses he's about to give up. An angel comes and feeds him and tells him to go to the Sinai. Takes him 40 days to go to the Sinai. He goes to the cave, by tradition, the same cave where Moshe Rabbeinu was hidden by God's hand when God revealed the 13 Midot HaRachamim. And God says to him, Eliyahu, what are you doing here? And he says, I'm trying to escape the king and the queen. They're killing all of the prophets. And your people have abandoned the covenant with you. I'll say this parenthetically. We know by tradition that Eliyahu Navi comes to every circumcision. And we have a special chair, and like, what an honor to invite Eliyahu Navi to come to the circumcision. But in a technical sense, why is Eliyahu at every brit? What is he doing there? And so we're told that when Eliyahu said, your people have abandoned your covenant, they've broken your covenant, there is no more covenant. God said, not true. Yeah, they're in a bad place right now, but just like I will never break my covenant with them, they also, even if it's a minority, they have not broken the covenant. And therefore, Eliyahu, you need to go to every circumcision until the end of time so that you can witness that that circumcision, which is the sign of the covenant, has not been broken. Anyways, Eliyahu is in this cave, and then it says that a whirlwind came by, like nothing he's experienced, and he was sure God was in this whirlwind. But the text says God was not in the whirlwind. And then there was the equivalent of an earthquake. The whole mountain shook. Eliyahu was sure that this represented the presence of God. It says God was not in the earthquake. And then the mountain is on fire. And God was not in the fire. And then it says that Eliyahu heard kol demama daka, a small, thin, silent voice. And it says he knew immediately that was God's presence. He goes out of the cave, and the story continues. He has a conversation with God. God then directs him what to do from there. So the reason I'm mentioning all of this is because already we made an equivalence between chashmal, which is silence, and speaking. And the paradox is together simultaneously. And this small, thin, silent voice. Well, if it's silent, then there's no voice. If there's a voice, then it's not silent. So it's the same experience. And that's what we want to emphasize here, that Eliyahu is in a certain way experiencing the chashmal, just like Ezekiel experienced the chashmal, and just like many other of the prophets, as we mentioned repeatedly, that Maaseh Merkavah is not confined to the first chapter of Ezekiel. It was an experience that many of the prophets experienced. But now there's a second reason why we want to bring Elijah the prophet back into the story. In the second book of Kings, the second chapter, verses 11 and 12, we have the story of how Elijah leaves this world. This is the end of the story of Elijah. He is, at this point, he is accompanied by his top student, Elisha, and it's already known that Eliyahu is about to leave this world. Eliyahu knows it, and Elisha knows it. And in fact, beforehand, Elijah says to him, do you have any last requests? And Elisha said, bless me with twice your energy, your inspiration, your consciousness. And Eliyahu says, that's not an easy request to fulfill. But if you see me when I leave this world, you in fact will be blessed in that way. So in the 11th and 12th verse, it says like this. I'll read it in English first. And it came to pass, as they still went on and talked, in other words, they were, as it were, walking down the road, talking, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire. This is one of the only times in the whole Tanakh that the word chariot is mentioned. As we've said repeatedly, in Ezekiel's vision, the word chariot never appears. It does appear in Zechariah's vision. But here it says that as they were walking along, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire. Remember, in Zechariah's vision, he saw 4 horses and parted them one from another. They're walking together, and this chariot of fire passes between them. And Eliyahu went up in a storm wind. Remember, Eliyahu has experienced a storm wind. And Ezekiel, at the beginning of his vision, experiences a storm wind. And it says, and he went up by a storm wind into heaven. This is one of the most graphic pictures we can imagine. Eliyahu is, in a certain way, being picked up on a chariot of fire, led by horses of fire as he ascends into heaven. And Elisha sees the whole thing. Elisha witnesses the whole thing. I'll continue. And Elisha saw it, and he cried, my father, the chariots of Israel and their horsemen. And he saw him no more. So here it's also significant that Elisha is calling to Eliyahu, my father, the chariot of Israel. So obviously, this is a very dramatic description of Eliyahu leaving this world. And because the fact it mentions a chariot here, but along with the chariot, there's the storm wind, there's the fire, there's the horses. All of these are elements that we've discussed in different ways from different visions of different prophets who were all experiencing the Merkavah. Now here, again, we see fire. Throughout Ezekiel's vision, the word Aish is repeated over and over and over again. It's a fiery vision. It represents the fire of the neshama. In another way, because remember, we have many different explanations of the symbolism of what he is experiencing. I'd say the vast majority of our explanations have been a very, very spiritual kind of vision that is revealing the very fabric of the spiritual and physical worlds, the unification of energy and matter, physical and spiritual. But remember, and we're going to see this very clearly next week when we go quickly through chapters 2 through 11, that the context of the whole vision of Ezekiel is happening as he's in exile and as the temple is about to be destroyed. So the fire here is a very pure, spiritual, soul-like fire, angelic kind of fire, but it also represents the fire of destruction. And at the end of the first chapter, when God, for the first time, speaks to him, it's about the destruction of the temple that is about to occur and the exile that is happening. But the connection to Eliyahu and Navi is very, very pronounced. He was a fiery personality. He was, in a certain way, he was called a zealot. He was very fiery. If you remember the classic story of how when he wanted to prove to the people, he was almost desperate. Everyone seemed to be worshiping the Baal idols. And he created, as we spoke about, the context of the gods on Mount Carmel. And in short, he proves to the people that God is God by drawing down God's fire upon the altar and consuming the offering. So Eliyahu is full of fire. Now, the Gemara says, who is Eliyahu? It says, Pinchas, hu Eliyahu. If you remember the story of Pinchas, when after Bilam, who desperately wanted to curse the Jews, is not able to, God only allows him to say blessings. Nonetheless, in the end, he gave advice to Balak that I wasn't successful, but you can be successful by getting them to sin. And that's the whole story, how the women from Midian came and they seduced the men, and a whole terrible story evolves with idol worship and sexual perversion. And Pinchas saved the day by, unfortunately, he had to do it through killing Zimri and Cosby, but he stops the plague. And so the question is asked, where did Pinchas get the strength? According to tradition, even in the Torah, Moshe didn't know what to do. The scene was so out of hand that the whole 70 elders and Moshe, they were frozen. They didn't know what to do. Pinchas came and he asked permission. He told Moshe what should be done, and he did it. But they asked, where did he get the strength? And so the Arizal revealed that at that moment, when no one else knew what to do, that he was able to stand up and do what had to be done. The souls of Nadav and Avihu entered into Pinchas. And if you remember, Nadav and Avihu, on the day that the tabernacle was inaugurated, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, they, in their own initiative, they didn't ask permission. Pinchas asked permission. They didn't ask permission. They took coals from the altar, they put incense, and they went into the Holy of Holies. And their souls were consumed in fire. They brought fire that was not commanded into the Holy of Holies, and through fire, their souls were consumed. So their fixing was with Pinchas, that their zealousness found the right channel. And then the Gemara says, Pinchas ze Eliyahu. And Eliyahu rises to So we see from Nadav and Avihu, fire. Pinchas is his zealousness is a manifestation of his inner fire, and that reaches its climax with the zealousness of Eliyahu Navi and his rising to heaven in a chariot. So these are just profound and deep connections that we're making, that we're connecting Maaseh Merkavah across Jewish history. We're riding the chariot through Jewish history to see connections that we might not have seen. Then the Gemara asks, what were they talking about? It says they were walking along the way and talking. And then this chariot comes and separates between them, takes Eliyahu, and he rises to heaven in a fiery chariot. So the sages said, what were they talking about? Meaning that there should be a connection between what they were talking about and what just happened. So there are a number of opinions, but probably the most prevalent opinion is they were talking about Maaseh Merkavah. So this is an amazing thing. They were talking about Maaseh Merkavah, and it manifests itself. The other opinion is they were talking about the Shema. They were talking about the Shema. But there's a deep connection here. There's a deep connection. We already made a connection of the 6 wings of the angels that Isaiah sees and the 6 sides of the Sukkah and the 6 directions that we shake lulav. We just made those connections. Shema has 6 words. And in fact, in the Tikkunei Zohar, it mentions this many times. The Tikkunei Zohar considers it very, very significant. Why? One of the ways to read Bereshit in the beginning is bara sheet. He created 6. Sheet in Aramaic means shesh. He created 6. What does that mean? The 6 days of creation. The very first word of the Torah is already telling us that creation is going to unfold in 6 words. The Tikkunei Zohar connects us deeply to the 6 words of Shema. So those are the two of the opinions, what they were talking about. And I'll end this part with a midrash that is brought about this whole discussion about Elijah the prophet ascending to heaven. The question is, well, what happened to him? What happened to his soul? So according to tradition, his soul was transformed or morphed or transcended into an angelic being that is beyond the strict rules of time and space. And that's what we have throughout Jewish history, hundreds of stories of Eliyahu and Navi appearing to countless peoples in countless situations. So in other words, a human being actually was transformed into an angel. But the Midrash says, we have the opposite also. When Avram Avinu, right 3 days after he circumcised himself, and God established an everlasting covenant with Avram for all time, and changed his name from Avram to Abraham. it says that God appeared to him at his tent, and it doesn't say what was revealed there. V'yera Hashem elav, v'hu yoshev, v'yera alav be'alonei moreh, v'hu yoshev be'petach ha'ohel k'chom hayom. That God appeared to him in the place called Alonei Mamre, and Avram was sitting at the opening of the tent in the heat of the day. So one of the explanations is that the opening of the tent means that Avram's neshama was wide open. He had just been given a new name, a new identity, and God had made an everlasting covenant with him. He was wide open and he was sitting in meditation. And God appeared to him. But what happened then? He sees three strangers passing in the distance. And he says to God, God, with all due respect, I need to take care of them. And according to tradition, they were pagans. They were idol worshippers. So, of course, this indicates Avram's tremendous chesed, that he was open to feeding and hosting and trying to turn on the whole world to the one God. So, but it turns out that the three men were actually three angels. So the Midrash says, puts these two stories together. Just like God can take a human soul and turn it into an angel, he can take angels and turn them into men. So this is a very, very beautiful, very, very beautiful Midrash. Okay, now we want to bring in one more important element here. Here's something that we have talked about repeatedly about Isaiah and his vision of the Merkavah, but we've never really introduced the verses that go along with it. They're actually very short and to the point. But nonetheless, the tradition is that just like Ezekiel and Zechariah and Daniel are giving these long, involved descriptions of their experiences, Elijah is so close to God, he just mentions it in passing. And the Gemara says that's the difference between Ezekiel and Isaiah. Ezekiel is like a country dweller who comes to the capital city where the king has his palace with the hope of getting a glimpse of the king. And so his whole experience is like so exciting and so full of the need to describe it because it's so, he never sees the king. He hardly ever goes to the capital city. Isaiah is like a city dweller who is used to seeing the king. It's an everyday occurrence that the king goes out with his horses, he goes for a ride, he goes here, he goes there. He's used to seeing the king. If you turn to the 6th chapter of the book of Isaiah, this is what it says. And then I'll explain the tremendous significance and influence of these few verses. So it says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw God sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. meaning the train, meaning as if he had like a garment on. So the train of the garment filled the temple. Now, obviously, this is not a real garment, and any garment would not fill the whole temple. It means the garment was his presence. He sees God sitting on a throne, and his presence filled the entire temple. Seraphim stood above him. Now, we're being introduced to a new type of angel called the Seraphim, coming from the word seraph, which means burning. These are called fire angels. Now, we know that Ezekiel, he only mentions Chariot and Ophanim, but he also mentions fire all the time. And so really, this is part of the whole inter-inclusion, enclosement, and fractal view of his whole vision, that even though he's witnessing Maseh Merkavah from the aspect of the world of Yetzirah, he's also touching on all the other spiritual worlds as well. But here, Isaiah calls these angels Seraphim, who stood above this vision of God. Each one had 6 wings. With 2, he covered his face. With 2, he covered his feet. And with 2, he flew. And one cried out to another, meaning one angel cried out to another, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." I'll stop there. His description continues. But even in those few verses, why is it so significant? Is because this quote, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, his glory fills the whole earth." An individual who is praying on their own repeats this 2 times every day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. If someone is davening with a congregation, this quote is repeated 4 times. 4 times. That's how important it is, and how symbolic it is, and how graphic it is. Here, again, we've mentioned many times this idea that the difference between Isaiah's vision from the world of Beriah is symbolized by the fact that these angels have 6 wings. Olam HaBriah in English is called the world of creation. And we just mentioned that the first word of the Torah can be read bara shit. He created 6. So Isaiah is witnessing, experiencing the Merkavah from a higher level, from the level of primordial creation. And that's the connection with the 6 wings and the 6 days of creation, and the fact that he's witnessing Maseh Merkavah from the world of creation. Another important thing here is that, and we discussed this, that when Ezekiel, towards the end of chapter 1, where he's finally seeing how the Ophanim and the Chariot are the chariot for the throne of God, and God sitting on the throne, but it doesn't say that. It says he sees the image of a man. And then it says, then he brings in the glory of God. And that's why the commentaries try to explain the almost contradiction here. Is he seeing a man, or is he seeing God? And so really what everyone comes to is he is having a vision of God, but his vision is coming from a lower world. And so he first experiences it as the image of a person, of a human. But now, this man here is not any man. This is primordial Adam. This is what's called Adam Kadmon. This is a very, very high level in the creative process. It's really the fifth world above the four usual worlds. So the Arizal introduced a higher level called Adam Kadmon. And that is what Yechezkel is seeing, but it's really God. Adam Kadmon is not an Adam. This is it's paradoxical. Just like we say that the divine soul within a human being is an actual part of God above. And so since this was the commentary of Mitsuda Davi, since God has no form, has no image, no way to describe it, the best that Ezekiel could come up with, he sees a vision of a man. But later, a few verses later, he is now aware that it is the glory of God. Here we see Isaiah, he sees God on the throne. He doesn't see a man on the throne. He sees God on the throne. So again, that's we'll call it the quality of the experience of Isaiah in relationship to the vision of Ezekiel. Now, I want to end with another beautiful, useful, practical, and mystical kavana that we can have for these words. Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzebakot, Melo Kol Haaretz Kavodo. Again, if we're davening with a community, we're going to say this 4 times every day. So one of the ways to understand this, and it's really intrinsic to everything we've been saying about the holistic vision that Yechezkel is seeing. We analyze the individual descriptions, the Chariot, and the faces, and the wings, and the Ofanim, and the fire, and the Chashmal, and the cloud. We have all of these different elements of his vision. But the deeper we try to understand the vision, the more we understand is he's being shown multiplicity, but at the same time, he's being shown the oneness between all the divergent parts. So listen carefully. And I'll quote again, we quoted this last week from the Maggid of Mezrich, who said, Atzilut is also here. Because many times we relate to these 4 spiritual worlds that we've been mentioning throughout these classes in a hierarchy. Here we are down in Olam Asiya, the world of physicality and materialism. And way up there is Olam Atzilut. But the Maggid said, Atzilut is also here. This is only a few words he said, but like the message is critical. And that is really the secret of Maseh Merkavah, of understanding the whole thing, is Yechezkel is experiencing all of it, but in different levels, different images, different metaphors, different symbology. So now, let's take these words that obviously the sages felt were so important that we say them 4 times every day, and look at it through the filter of all of these worlds. So the first time we say kadosh, the first holy, that represents olam ha'atzilut. And in fact, and I invite everyone, I can't promise, but in almost every prayer book, you'll see a line after the first kadosh, a thin line, because the world of Atzilut, in a certain way, is really way up there. It's not like we can't experience it, but it is way up there. And this represents a type of holiness that is uniquely God's. The next holy or kadosh is the world of Bria, the world of creation. We're going down the ladder. The vision is coming from above to below. The third kadosh is Olam Yitzirah, the world of formation. And then when it says, one second. Melo kol haaretz kavodo, the whole world is full of his glory. That is our world, Olam Asiyah. So if you followed what happened here, it's a very simple kavana, but like we're drawing down God's energy from above through the worlds into this world. Now look what happens. And I'll read from the Shachri prayer. So we say, Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzavakot, Melo kol haaretz kivodo. Then what does it say? It says, V'ha'ofanim, V'chayot HaKodesh, Barash Gadol mitnasim lumat Seraphim, lumatam mishabchim v'yomrim. Baruch kavod Hashem mimakomo. I'll translate. Okay, remember, we've said this whole verse, we've in a certain way become a channel to bring God's energy into the world. Then it says, the Ofanim, remember, these are the wheel angels. The wheel angels are related to the Olam Asiyah. The Chayot HaKodesh and the holy Chayot, they are from the world of Yetzirah. And that's why they are the main angel in Ezekiel's vision, because that's where he is seeing them from, world Yetzirah. And it says, Barash Gadol, with a great sound, Mitnasim Lumat Seraphim, they turn and they face towards the Seraphim. Who are the Seraphim? This is from Isaiah's vision in the world of Bria. So if everyone is following, now we're going up. First, we drew down God's energy, and now we are, in a certain way, singing with the angels. We are responding. So first, the Ofanim in the world of Asiyah, and then the Chayot HaKodesh in the world of Yetzirah, and then the Seraphim in the world of creation, and then it says Lumatam Mishabchim V'Yomrim, and so the Ofanim and the Chayot face the Seraphim, and they praise, saying, "Blessed is the glory of God from his place." Now, this is one of the reasons I said that we are going to go quickly through chapters 2 through 11 of Ezekiel. And I mentioned that because in 3 of the chapters, Ezekiel returns to his vision. But then this response, Baruch Kavod Hashem Mimkamo, comes from the 3rd chapter of Ezekiel. So the holy, holy, holy comes from Isaiah, but the response of these different levels of angels are coming from Ezekiel. Blessed is the glory of God from his place. So just to put this together, and this is connected. I'll go back. Remember, the sages asked, what were Elijah and Elisha talking about when the fiery chariot came and took Eliyahu away? So the 2 opinions we brought were, they were discussing Maseh Merkavah and or the Shema. And I mentioned one explanation of the Shema, but here we're going to add a very important one. And we learned this already. When it says that God is one, Hashem Echad, so the sages said, what should we be thinking about when we say the word Echad? God is one. So probably the most basic intent is by taking the 3 letters of Echad and explaining how we want to relate to the fact that God is one. The Aleph of Echad represents the oneness of God. The Chet equals 8. So our sages said, so imagine that we want to draw the oneness of God through the 7 heavens and the earth. 7 and 1 is 8. And then the Dalet equals 4. Dalet equals the 4 cardinal directions. So in other words, when we say the Shema, again, we want to draw down God's oneness through the 7 heavens and to the earth, and then spread it like Avram Avinu to the whole world. Beautiful, beautiful kavana for the Shema. But now, if we take that and we compare it to the way we're describing Isaiah saying, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, the whole world is full of his glory, and how we go, that's bringing down, that's like saying Echad. But here we have the response. Remember, when we draw light from above, this is called Or Yeshar, straight light. But when we respond from below, this is called returning light. So here we have holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole world is full of his glory. That's like saying the Hashem Echad. We're drawing down God into this world. But then we respond, first the Ophanim, the angels of the world of Asiyah, then the Chayot HaKodesh, the angels of the world of formation, and then the Seraphim, the world of creation. And then we would imagine when it says, blessed is the glory of God from his place, that's Atzilut. Now we've returned to where we came from. But there's a deeper secret here. And this learned from Rav Ginsburg, one of the numerical gems that we produced, gives over this Torah. He reveals, blessed is the glory of God from his place. In Hebrew, Baruch Kavod Hashem Mimkamo. Kavod, or the glory, the numerical value of Kavod is 32. Hashem, the 4-letter name of God, is 26. When you multiply 32 times 26, you get 832 equals Eretz Yisrael. Ever since I learned this, it was many years ago, I cannot say these words without thinking of this. And what it means is, like the Maggid says, in one hand, when we do the Or Chozer, Ofanim, V'chayet HaKodesh, Seraphim, blessed is the glory of God from his place. That is Atzilut, way up here. But paradoxically, mysteriously, significantly, the words Kavod Hashem, when multiplied by each other, equals Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is the place of God's glory. That's why we call it the Holy Land. As simple as it is. God's presence here is more accentuated than any other place, maybe even the world of Atzilut. We should never forget that. So we'll conclude with a blessing. First of all, especially in our times when so many are turning their backs on Eretz Yisrael, that we should never forget that this is the headquarters of holiness. This is the Holy Land. And we should never lose the belief and the hope that it will be manifest. In a certain way, it is happening already, but certainly the last 2 years has kind of, for too many people in the world, it's covered up. But we know that this is the ultimate place for God's glory. Redemption is coming, and we see it soon and in our day.